My name is Olivia Povey and my chosen specialism is post-production editing. I will specifically be looking at colour correction versus colour grading and how this changes the tone and the mood of both photography and filmography. I'll also be looking at how it creates emotion and how this affects the audience. I will be exploring how colour correction and colour grading is different, either making images look better and more natural to cover up errors from production, or to stylise the tone, mood and atmosphere within the piece. Within my research and testing, I will touch upon colour theory, as this is important to understand when looking at colour grading. I will be using the softwares Photoshop and Premiere Pro to edit footage and photos of which I've taken on my own DSLR. I will see how I can use these skills within my own practical work in the future to convey emotion and create atmosphere. Firstly, I will be discussing colour correction. This is the process of adjusting the colour, contrast and exposure of film footage or photos so that it appears natural. It should resemble what is normal for the human eye to see and shouldn't be jarring or appear processed. In short, the viewer should not be able to tell that the image was edited and instead believe that it was almost entirely filmed that way on camera. As stated earlier, I have taken some of my own photos to showcase this process. As you can see, for this image I have adjusted the contrast. Aside from the original image, there is a softer, low contrast version and a sharper, high contrast version. The lower contrast image looks stylistic and almost dreamy, and the higher contrast makes the photo pop out and draws attention to it. For correcting an image, it's good to get a nice balance of the two. Depending on what is in focus or what the audience is intended to see first, the main subject or foreground perhaps should be a higher contrast and the background should be lower. Exposure determines how bright or dark your photo is. In camera, the more light that reaches the sensor, the brighter the image. Exposure can be adjusted in post to create a balanced brightness, or, if used as a style or theme choice, to excessively darken or brighten the image. Here's an example of a high exposure in Midsummer, which combines beautiful bright imagery with a distressing story to create something quite unsettling to the audience. As an example of a darker image, here is a clip from The Godfather, which combined hard lights with the use of shadows and underexposure in post to create something cinematically outstanding. Hues and saturation can also be adjusted in software such as Photoshop and Premiere Pro to make colours pop or to make them duller. Here I have adjusted the green and magenta hues to make the flower look brighter and more colourful. The difference is barely noticeable, but if you put them side by side you can see there is quite a change. Notice that the colour still remains natural and that it could still pass as a raw image. I have also adjusted the levels of the photos so that the brightness and the exposure remain natural. Here is an image of which I have colour corrected to bring out the colours of the leaves and to richen the red-brown colours. If I turn the saturation fully down, it becomes black and white. This is called monochrome. It can appear old-fashioned or stylised for a horror, dependent on exposure and contrast. The image looks natural, but removes a modern colour filter. To briefly conclude, colour correction is a brilliant way to ensure that images and video remain natural during the editing process. It is a great way to fix any issues regarding the lighting and camera without having to backtrack to production. Before understanding colour grading, we must first have a basic understanding of colour theory. In colour theory, colours are organised on a colour wheel and grouped into three categories: primary colours, secondary colours and tertiary colours. Midtones, shadows and highlights are what they are called in edit. To better understand the colour theory and its impacts for colour grading, I watched Secrets of Colour Grading in Photography by Joanna Kustra. She gives an in-depth look at the use of colour in imagery and how it shows emotion. With her giving an insight to colour harmony and how to get an impactful photo from colour grading, she inspired me to try this myself. With this in mind, I could now get a far better grip on colour grading, something of which that has interested me for a couple of years now. Here is an example from the movie Joker. The movie is a psychological horror practically posed as a comedy, with themes of laughing through the film. The colours seen are bright and in post to accompany this, and even so, there is a teal undertone seen the whole span of the movie to resemble sadness. I tried to do something similar with footage I shot myself, adding both cool undertones and warm undertones to different shots to see how it would make my footage look. Wes Anderson typically uses a colour palette full of soft pastel hues. His films look playful and dreamlike, stylised in such a unique way that he is renowned for it. Some of his colour palettes come from set, prop and costume design, but it is heightened through colour grading practices and techniques. The retro pastel look visualises his worlds like no other, and I wanted to recreate this for myself. Stanley Kubrick is a director known for his unique uses of colour to create amazing visuals. His use of red heightens the danger factor of his films, which is clearly shown in The Shining. Blade Runner 2049 stands out to me as an exceptional use of colour grading. The yellow-orange hues in the shots shown give off a warmth that makes the audience visualise the atmosphere more and feel like they're really there. The colour yellow also shows enlightenment for both the character and the audience as they discover plot points. This acts as almost a subconscious cue for the audience and for the hero. Colour grading creates an atmospheric mood and tone for the piece of media, something that's stylistic and not always completely natural. This can be in any extreme, from something from a typical horror or thriller, to something seen in Stanley Kubrick or Wes Anderson films. Colour correction and colour grading are a necessity within film and photography, whether to correct production errors, to make the image that bit more professional, or to completely change the style of the piece. I will take the inspiration and editing skills I have gained from this craft to improve my specialism. Next semester, I hope to learn more about editing and create a film or form of media with these newfound skills.